emergency for the first time in about
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 1325.IS2314, certificate number 32056. Trafalgar versus Carmania.
Have you been on a cruise? A cruise ship?
No.
I know you've cruised to the Strip in your hometown.
You and I, yeah. I've been to some very cruisy restrooms. You and I are going to go on a cruise together.
Wide stance Jennings, they call it. We're only a couple of weeks out from your debut cruise and my what will probably be 12th cruise.
Were you on the inaugural one?
I was on the so we're talking about the Jonathan Colton cruise. I was part of the initial cast and was on every subsequent one. I missed one a couple of years ago.
Oh, that's gotta hurt.
This will be, I think, the 10th Jonathan Colton cruise. But I was also the music director of the
Titanic.
I was the.
You kept playing.
I did.
Good job.
I kept playing as the Titanic of indie rock sank beneath the waves. No, I was the music director of 2 Maximum Fun cruises.
I forgot that they did that as a cruise.
Yeah, so I've been on a lot more cruises than I thought I would.
There is more nerd podcast cruise culture than I would have expected,
and more all the time. I think there's probably a serial cruise now, and maybe a Mark Maron cruise. I don't.
What
think there's a
percentage
Mark
of the
Maron
world's
cruise,
geeks are in international waters at all times now?
right?
At some point, you're going to get a critical mass, and they can just found a nation state.
Well, the thing is that you need to keep some of your nerds at sea in case of an apocalypse.
That's what the Scientologists do.
Yeah,
They're not wrong.
How are you going to reestablish nerd culture if you don't have a seed population?
Right. We need a seed arc of people who have never actually spilled their seed.
Ooh. Boy, that took me like 2 seconds to get the full depth of your crime.
It's a rare audio triple take.
I didn't expect that I would be on a cruise, but thinking of you and your family, you could have cruised independent of this opportunity.
I don't even know. You can use cruise as a verb like that?
Yes.
We're going to cruise this summer.
Yes.
That seems weird.
I'm sorry, but the whole cruise culture has its own language.
This is what's keeping me out.
All these manners.
Teach me, John. Walk me through this.
I'm going to walk you aboard the Amsterdam or whatever, the Rotterdam, and I'm going to walk you through. I'm going to take you to the Butter Lion. I'm going to take you to the.
Soon we'll be making another run. Yeah, we've never done an Alaska cruise as a family, which you'd think we would have here in Seattle.
Yeah.
I'm sure maybe it'll happen at some point. I'm resistant to the idea.
Didn't you go to Antarctica? Didn't you do some kind of boat
Does
thing?
that count as a cruise?
Well, I don't know. I've never been.
It's a Russian icebreaker boat. There's no shuffleboard.
That doesn't sound very cruisy.
I mean, there's a lounge and there's a dining room aft, but it's kind of small.
It sounds more like a bus.
It's a Greyhound bus that's basically crossing the Drake Passage, so you're throwing up a lot. So basically a regular Greyhound bus.
Well, I'm excited for you. We're going to be doing omnibus live in front of a cruising audience. We'll be doing this show live at sea.
What is it like to do it in front of a booze-soaked audience instead of just here in your basement? Here in the bunker, I mean.
Yeah, I know. My audience here in this bunker could not be less booze-soaked.
Diet Dr. Pepper-soaked audience.
The thing about nerds in general is that they're extremely supportive. They're part of the just let people like what they like culture. So they're going to love us, even if they don't. They're going to love us.
They will laugh at the unfunny jokes because that's what it being a good audience means to them. They're courteous.
So it'll be like you send it immediately to heaven.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, but I'm a little apprehensive because anytime a cruise makes the news, it's not because of something good. It's because of what's that virus, bacteria that kills everything in
about
hospitals?
The poop cruise, E. coli, or no?
What's the hospital on
MRSA. MRSA.
Yeah, MRSA or whatever it is, or a drunk captain just turns the thing over, or you never hear about the thousands of crews that go off without a hitch and people just eat mediocre food and get a sunburn. I think there should be more coverage of that.
Yeah, well, that's the reason that you only hear about the total disasters.
Well, plus the ecological impact, the ongoing disaster that cruise ships represent.
And the one kind of is related to the other. You only hear about the disasters because cruising is so commonplace now. Mm-hmm. There are so many cruise ships plying the world's oceans that it's just like you only hear about airplane disasters because it's no longer novel that an airplane full of people, do anything.
It's a commute.
It's a commute. They're everywhere. And
if you're from the Midwest and you've never seen the scale, if you're from some landlocked place and you've never seen the scale of one of these ships, honestly, if you're from the Midwest, you probably cruise every year.
Right. That's exactly right.
But if you've never been somewhere and you've been able to see a cruise ship in comparison to reference objects on land, it is shocking. I was looking down a little narrow canal in Venice once, and suddenly the end of the canal is just filled with a cruise ship in the lagoon, and it just keeps going. It's like the first shot of Star Wars. Yeah. Like the cruise ship just keeps coming. It's the size of a city.
And there is a sort of one-upsmanship among cruise lines. They're constantly launching new ships. The largest ship at the moment is the Symphony of the Seas, which is a Royal Caribbean ship. It has a gross tonnage of 228,000 tons. It's 360 feet long, and it can carry 6,600 people.
Oh my gosh.
Which is absolutely the size of a small town, right? A small town, but a town.
We should found a bigger cruise ship and just call it the One-Upsman ship.
Oh!
It'll be impossible to beat.
This is the kind of joke that is going to kill on cruise ships.
Ha ha, I understood a pun. Ha ha ha, says the Joko cruise audience.
And when I say 6,600 people, that's passengers. And generally on a cruise
what's
ship,
the crew complement?
You have almost as many crew.
Really?
Because you have just the waiters alone. There are
6,600 people, 6,600 waiters.
There are at least 1,000 waiters.
I'd love to get issued a waiter right when I go up the gangplank. This is Rudy. He will be with you your entire trip.
No, wait, I'm wrong here. This says there are only 2,200 crew.
This new ship has more robots.
Yeah,
there's 4,400 robot waiters as well.
What it probably means is that you spend a lot of time going, hello, like chinking the ice in your drink, like chinka, 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 hello?
I thought it was all buffets.
There are a lot of buffets. There's a lot of gravy on cruise ships, which is my main attraction.
See, to some people that would be a deal breaker that there's so much gravy.
Right.
But not for you.
No. In fact, I will take the food of any nation and put gravy on it, and it's a unifier, right? Gravy brings the foods of all nations together and creates one sort of trash meal. So if you put like some tacos,
right, if you've got a buffet plate, and you've got a gyro and some chop suey,
right, a little bit of gumbo, you've got some curry, and then you just put that delicious brown gravy right over everything.
This is why you like Central and Eastern Europe. Mm-hmm. They've already got the gravy.
They do.
You don't have to do a thing.
But we've talked about cruise ships on this show before. We've talked about
Remind me when.
We've talked about the SS United States.
Yes. The ocean liner that's now rusting somewhere.
That's right, rusting in Philadelphia Harbor.
Sad.
And we talked about all the different trophies and championships that cruise ships used to trade back and forth as they crossed the Atlantic.
When speed was an issue, right?
Right.
Because my kids were surprised the other day when I told them that, well into the middle of the 20th century, most people would if you were going to Europe, if you were a middle upper class American, you would not fly.
No.
Because that was, well, first of all, it involved many stops up until, I don't know, when's the first nonstop commercial transatlantic flight? Surprisingly late in the 20th century.
Right, surprising.
You would just assume that everybody would spend a week on a boat.
My parents took a Hawaiian cruise, which is a thing that hardly exists. I mean, I don't know if you could take a boat from San Francisco to Hawaii.
You could,
now.
but you'd have to take it at gunpoint.
Ooh,
I'm the captain
good
now.
point.
I mean, any boat's a cruise ship if you've got a big enough gun.
Most Hawaiian cruises leave from Hawaiian ports now and tool around Hawaii and then bring you back.
I have seen them.
Yeah, but
there. But from California, no, right?
No, because what the whole premise of a cruise now is that you make multiple stops, and even though it's kind of a flawed premise, because all of the places that are set up to receive a large cruise ship have also very intentionally evacuated any local color from the cruise area.
Probably at the request of the local color.
Yeah.
They don't want to be there.
Well, no, and the places where the local color haven't managed to evacuate themselves, boy, they are resentful when a cruise ship pulls into town, and because the money doesn't disseminate to everyone, it's pretty collected.
I'm not even an indigenous person much.
Yeah,
and I get angry when I'm in downtown Seattle and suddenly I can't cross first because people are trying to drive down into Pike Place Market.
Right.
Because there's 3,000 cruisies in town.
Imagine if you lived in a town of 3,500
Right.
people and 6,500 people arrived.
Do I sell cute little origamis made of soda cans? Because in that case, maybe I'm delighted.
Well, no, because the cruise companies restrict who can. They don't want you as a cruiser to leave the protected enclave that they create on shore. So they have all kinds of.
You might get murdered buying weed.
Well, you might meet anybody else, right? And so you're not encouraged to go into the town. You're not encouraged to shop locally. You're encouraged to shop from kiosks that have paid a fee to set up within the gate. And then you can go out with an authorized tour that takes you to a nice beach somewhere.
I just had the first experience of my life of trying to price some of these excursions.
Yeah.
And it's clear that they can charge what they do because there is no competition.
Sure, what are you going to do?
They don't want you to know about Pablo's bike tour of Santo Domingo. They want you to go on theirs that's $249 a head.
Many, many times I have left the cruise and gone into the town and walked around and met people who have said, "Why don't you go back to the cruise?
You're not supposed to.
You're
be
sort
here.
of walking around our neighborhood now, and that's you don't belong."
Are you supposed to have a little card or something that gives you non-cruise rights? Like, how do you show them that you're a kind of authentic soul?
Well, the same way I show everyone that I'm a man of the world. I say, "Hello, hail fellow, well met."
You clap someone on the back heartily, and that does it?
I waved at a guy last year. I forget where, I was in St. John or something. I was walking along and I looked down an alley and there was someone, I don't know, monkeying around halfway up the alley, and he looked at me and I looked at him and I waved and he just gave me double birds, just like, I was like, and we both had a laugh at it. I was like, yeah, I get it.
No, you're not wrong.
You nailed me. And he's like, I mean, we were 100 feet apart. So.
My Spanish is not bad.
Oh, well,
will that do me any good?
In some ports, it depends
not in
on
Jamaica.
Depends on who the colonizers were.
Right, but what I'm saying is, will that give me any? Hey, go back to the ship, Whitey. Credit.
No. Okay. No one's going to look at you and imagine that you are authentic anywhere outside of the Jello belt.
Outside of a very small belt.
Yeah.
Most of which is in Idaho.
I mean, yeah, right. In Nebraska, you'll get a handshake, right? But even if you go as far as South Dakota, people are going to recognize you as someone from the South. By which I mean Nebraska.
From the South. It's true. I can't even go to Canada anymore.
Well, part of the excitement of cruising is that it has associations with a more glamorous time, and this was part of
despite everything about cruising culture today trying to kill out those associations, they do persist.
Even in the time of the SS United States, it was. That ship fell into disrepair because the jet the jet airplane supplanted it. Even then, it was an attempt to kind of recapture the golden age. But I think a lot of people begin their first cruise or imagine that there's some component to cruising that still has the sound of tinkling champagne glasses and tuxedos. Glamour.
You told me I was going to have to get a tux for this thing.
I did. And
I'm unhappy about it.
Partly I'm gaslighting you because cruising now has become largely the purview of people that never take off their sweatpants. It's just as things become more accessible, as things are more as the middle class sort of, I feel like in America now the middle class is economically suppressed, but culturally ascendant. Everything, even the rich now aspire to look like they
shop at Target.
Yeah, right. Work at a mall. So there are an awful lot of people that show up to formal night in clothes that you would use if you were cleaning a tennis court.
Well, when they asked me where my stateroom, when they gave me the questions to show where my stateroom would be, it was just one question. It was, do you take your shoes off on airplanes? And I clicked yes, of course. And I got condemned to deck 5 or
deck
whatever.
5. But there still is a little bit of kind of lip service paid to the idea that these are special nights. You know, there's
just all commercials. The commercial is just like, make this look like a magical fairyland. Maybe I'm just thinking of Disney cruises, but it's, because you're surrounded by water. It's romantic.
Yeah, and it is. It's a romantic thing, but it harkens to a time when cruising was truly elegant, and it's not that cruises were only accessible to the very rich, because if you think about the sinking of the Titanic, there were at least 1,000 poor people locked behind a gate.
There's a reason why the Titanic music is an Irish Celtic flute trilling, because that's the sound of the bubbles going up from an underwater Irish person.
But our story today involves another side of cruising, and that is that cruise ships, being the large vessels that they are, cruise ships often are employed in other capacities in time of war, because cruise ships and cruise liners, as we saw in the story about the SS United States, they often are sort of ambassadors, representatives of their nations. The Lusitania or the Titanic, even. I mean, they are
not a very good ambassador. The Titanic.
The Titanic was a great ambassador.
That's like a Trump era ambassador
first.
that lasts 1 week and then says something awful on social media.
It's a big boat that even now in the event of war, when a navy or a military force needs to be transported from one place to another, those ships get requisitioned. They get grabbed by the government and cruise ships.
The government is there a law for that? The government can just commandeer your cruise ship?
Well, they can, and in a lot of cases, cruise ships are built with this in mind. Like the Queen Mary was built with the idea that she could be converted into a troop ship. So they bake it into the design that at some point in the life of this boat, it may be that we take the chandeliers out.
The shrimp buffet flips over,
right?
And there's like a radar screen, and exactly, and chipped beef on toast.
So it's something that's always happened from the beginning of pleasure cruising, and part of that is that in the event of war, cruising sort of falls by the wayside. Right. You don't.
Here's what you don't want to do if there's U-boats around, and I assume it's profitable for the cruise line owner, right? Somebody gets a fat check from defense budgets, from War Department budgets.
I mean, I think that probably that's true, but also I think probably every cruise company would rather there not be a war. let's not say that
I'm
cruise
not saying
companies are
that they're-
profiteers.
I'm not saying they're banging the drums right now. Like, I'm not saying that the whoever owns the SS Persian Gulf is very excited to see that retrofitted with anti-aircraft guns. But I'm just saying they're not losing out on all their income, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess they probably.
Why am I worried about Monsieur Cunard?
If the ship sinks, they probably get an insurance settlement. Although
Yeah.
I don't know how you insure your boat against torpedoes. That seems like one of those line items that your ship gets sunk and you go to claim your insurance and they're like, reading your policy,
Yeah, I never checked that box.
we didn't see torpedo.
I thought it would include torpedo.
But it's a fairly, it's a sort. I mean, even during the Falklands War, a lot of cruise ships were requisitioned. But it was very true
By the British or the Argentines?
by the British.
Oh, okay.
It was very true during wartime when ships did the lion's share of troop transport and heavy lifting. Right. I mean, I don't think during the Iraq War the U.S. required any cruise ships because they just. I mean, we're now able to transport troops
everybody
by
flies over,
airplanes. Yeah. But during World War I and World War II, a lot of merchant ships and cruise ships were pressed into service. And our story takes place at the very beginning of World War I. In the years immediately prior to World War I, this was the heyday of the big pleasure liner. And the major nations were all building big liners as the sort of jewel in their crown, and evidence that they were among the elite of nations. It's kind of like you only certain countries are industrialized enough that they can produce a viable automobile, right? It's a sort of a sign that you have joined the ranks of the truly successful industrial powers. Like there still really aren't mass-produced Russian cars flooding the streets of major nations, right? And it's a strange sort of industrial benchmark that Korea can become a major automaker, and Russia just never has managed to.
Yeah, at the time, think of it. That's the forefront of technology. A big gleaming ocean liner, like that's as far as we've gotten. I guess maybe the modern analog would be a space program.
Yeah,
where
right.
Suddenly a China or a European Space Agency or an India is racing to catch up.
Yeah, can you put something into outer space? That's quite a challenge.
Back then, instead of saying we can put a man on the moon, we would say we can put 2,000 rich people in the middle of the North Atlantic. But that was what the expression was.
Well, and so then the question was, can you put 2,000 rich people in the middle of the Atlantic and serve them the best food they've ever had, and have a boat that's really fast? Like that makes that journey. It's hilarious to think now that the difference of a few hours in crossing the Atlantic would have.
Well, think about it today. It's like taking the nonstop flight, right? You'll be like, oh, hey, this one gets into Southampton at 6 a.m. The other one gets in at 7 p.m. that night. I'm going to take the faster boat.
The fast one.
So you've got to solve the engine problem and the beef Wellington problem.
That's
You've
right.
got two avenues of technological innovation.
The British and the French were great at creating boats like this, and the Cunard line, as you said, was sort of the preeminent
purveyor,
the preeminent purveyor of this onboard experience. So in 1905, the RMS Carmania was launched.
Carmania. We were out of Lusitania and we were out of actual Roman provinces. Carmania sounds like a fake. Actually, it sounds like a website where you see your Blue Book value.
To go to the Carmania.com.
What is Carmania? You should do what is Carmania?
Carmania, Carpathia.
You need to.
Caragenia.
You need to Cartagena. You need to distinguish all these.
Carmania actually is it is a reference to an ancient Achaemenid. How is that pronounced? Achaemenid?
Achaemenid? I've never had to say it.
Oh, it doesn't have an R. Achaemenid. Achaemenid.
It's like that's vaguely what, Persian or something.
Yeah, you read about it in the Bible because the Seleucid Empire is there, and they were fighting the Hebrews. This is all part of the Achaemenid.
This is back when there were wars in Iran.
Something
we don't have to worry about.
Let's call it that. Achaemenid Empire.
Okay.
It effectively was. As it had an extent almost as great as Alexander's. It went, it was all of Asia and Turkey, and it went through Bulgaria and as far as.
Oh, you're talking about the whole Achaemenid.
The
Empire.
whole Achaemenid.
That's not Carmania didn't stretch on two continents.
No, Carmania is a tiny little corner of the Achaemenid Empire.
A little Persian corner of it.
Yeah, it's sort of, I think it would be the area immediately opposite of it's in the Persian Gulf.
The Straits of Hormuz.
Yeah, it's directly opposite the airport there.
The airport. What is that on the other side? Oman?
No, Oman is down below. This is...
It's part of the UAE.
Right. United Arab Emirates.
Oh,
it's
right.
across from the Emirates.
That's what I'm saying.
I was trying to say.
What I'm saying.
Yeah.
And it's close to Oman. There's a little exclave there's a little bit of Oman for some reason that's an island in the middle of the UAE there. I don't know why.
Everybody gets a little island. And we'll see that actually plays into this story later too.
Interesting.
But the Carmania, you're right. I mean, they had run out of good names and were launching ships with, basically any place you could put an Ania at the end of it.
Was the Carmania fancy? Was it a good one?
The Carmania was extremely fancy. It had a sister ship by the name of the Caronia, and let's leave
Carmania, Carpathia.
Yeah, the Caronia was an early Toyota, and also the sister ship of the Carmania, and they were both very forward-looking ships, and actually the two ships were built identical to one another except with different systems of propulsion. So one of them had the Caronia had the older style of propulsion system, what was called the quadruple expansion coal burning engine, and the Carmania had a new sort of turbine.
It had dilithium crystals.
It had dilithium crystals. The Caronia actually was the first ship that sent out an ice warning the night that the Titanic sank.
Oh, wow.
So, these ships were all plying the world's oceans sort of contemporaneous with one another. But the Carmonia and why do I say Carmonia? The Carmania and the Caronia were built in order to test out the two propulsion systems.
Oh, interesting.
Because there was still a lot of...
That's like how Boeing did that with the 737. They had two different steering systems, and they wanted to know which one would crash.
The turbines of the Carmania that was such a novel technology that there was still a lot of doubt about whether or not it was a valid system. And so they were like, let's build a ship with one of each.
So you get all those early adopter, Prius people, Tesla people, who are willing to risk the new thing.
Right.
They're the equivalents of, the people who would do space tourism in a heartbeat today.
And it's interesting to think that at the time they were willing to build a ship and then replace its propulsion system if they figured out later on, this is a better engine. We'll just. That must be a major undertaking.
You can do it with a car. You just have a cruise ship on your front lawn for a long time with the hood up.
So the Carmania was, a very luxurious liner. It was doing this New York to Liverpool run. That was sort of maybe the one of the crown jewel sort of routes. A lot of people in Liverpool, it's pre-Beatles Liverpool, right? But that was a major port,
one of the bigger ports
in the UK. And the Carmania had a pretty good run, a pretty good life as a cruise ship from 1905 to the beginning of World War I. On the German side, this was also an era where the Germans were part of the conditions that led up to World War I was that Germany was trying to assert itself as a world power, as a global industrial power, and they were late to a lot of the games that other European nations played. Games,
Colonialism.
yeah.
Maybe cruise ship building? Is that what you're going to say?
Worlds Without Frontiers, War Without Tears, Games Without Frontiers. I'm sorry, I'm having a Peter Gabriel Tourette.
Is this some Will Wheaton tabletop game I don't know about? Worlds Without Tears.
But, Germany suffered, I think, in the early 20th century from an inferiority complex. They were late to the colonial game. They were late to really nation statedom, and there was a lot of internal desire to prove themselves on the world stage, and so every one of these arenas, they felt a lot of pressure, and they were really trying to push the ball forward to arrive in the kind of like the stateroom of the major powers.
You've got these efficient Prussians who think it should be their birthright.
Right.
They're better than the Belgians. They're better than the English.
Yeah. How dare the Portuguese have colonies all around the world?
But they're being held back by these good-timey Bavarians slamming their beer steins together.
Right. Those lazy people from the Black Forest.
Those no good Saxons.
They, and eventually, of course, the problem was they decided to colonize Central Europe. But at the time,
because they'd missed Africa.
They had.
Well, what do we still got? Poland, I guess.
They were starting to crank out this kind of, I guess you would say, consumer good, which was the luxury liner,
the ultimate big consumer good. Then.
Yeah, right. And
it wasn't the iPhone.
They were way ahead of the rest of the world in terms of airship dirigible technology.
They were so far ahead, they were the only ones.
But in 1914, and this is maybe a bad time to launch a cruise ship.
In hindsight, John, hindsight.
In the spring of 1914, the Germans launched the SMS Cap Trafalgar, and it's named after Trafalgar, where the British defeated Napoleon.
Which remind me, peninsula in Spain?
It's on the southern coast of Spain, the sort of Algarve coast of Spain. So outside of Gibraltar on the ocean side.
Now, I can see why a British person would name something after Trafalgar. It's one of their great landmarks.
Right, but if you think...
Why are the Germans naming something after a Spanish port where the British won a historic victory?
Because the Germans really didn't like Napoleon. And this is still in a period when, there wouldn't have been direct memory of Napoleon, but what happened in the 19th century that created what became sort of modern Germany, it was all a domino effect from those Napoleonic invasions.
So they're like your mom. They're just making decisions based on Napoleon spite.
Apart.
Obsolete Napoleon spite.
The Trafalgar was a real next gen kind of ocean liner, a really kitted out 1,600 passengers, which at the time was a really, really big boat.
That seems huge.
And it was, the height of sort of German luxury, and it was making...
Now, wait a second. The height of German luxury.
It was the AMG.
You don't have to scoop your own coal in your cabin? No, I'm sure it was very nice.
It was very nice.
I bet they had little thin slices of cucumbers on the ladies' eyes in the spa and the salon.
They did. There were deck-top swimming pools, which weren't true of all these kinds of ships.
I bet that's a real structural issue that we don't even think about today.
Big sort of atrium across the top. But it was making the run to South America, which, again, the Germans playing catch-up.
They'd missed all the good trade routes.
They had missed all of South America, but there were
Does this explain why the Nazis ended up there?
It does, kind of.
As kids?
There were attempts to sort of retro-colonize places like Uruguay and Paraguay.
There's still a big German, ethnically German minority population in Buenos Aires and Uruguay, and maybe even further north, maybe like Colombia as well, I think.
Well, we'll talk about that in a future omnibus when we talk about Nietzsche's sister. That's on my list to
Nietzsche's sister's on my list too, if you know what I mean.
But there was a big tourist trade between Germany and Montevideo and Buenos Aires. This was and Brazil. Like cruise ships would make these stops. The Germans are just looking for a little piece of their own, you know.
They just want some. They just want some nice warm beaches.
Yeah, they're not. You know, they're not dumb like everybody says. They're smart, and they just want it. They just want something of their own.
They want to lie out on Ipanema Beach and turn red, and then have a beer.
So the Trafalgar was you know it set sail in April. It made this transit down to Buenos Aires, and unfortunately was caught down there at the beginning of World War I. And World War I, of course, nobody could have foreseen it. But when it happened, when war was declared, all these countries had shipping and things in far-flung places in the world, and then they found themselves at war.
What was going on in South America then? Like what was Argentina's part, for example? Were they allied with the Allied powers? They must have been, right? Because of the American cultural hegemony. I don't like saying that word out loud. Hegemony.
No, Argentina was neutral in World War I, and I think World War I didn't extend to South America in the same way that World War II did. It was much easier for those countries to provide neutral ports and kind of, both sides it.
Yeah, they can make material for everybody, right?
Right. And that plays in here. There are a lot of rules of war that have to do with neutral ports. And if your warship goes into a neutral port to resupply.
This sounds like the rules to a board game.
You should not. It is. It effectively is. You're in a little bubble in this neutral port where your enemy can't come in and attack because it would be effectively attacking a neutral territory.
Your enemy's at the other end of the ally doing middle fingers with both hands, and you're like, "Hey, buddy, I'm in my cruise bubble."
We see this a lot in the 20th century history of war, and in particular here at the mouth of the River Plata, and the River Plata forms the border between Uruguay and Argentina.
Yeah, you'll go Uruguay and they'll go theirs.
And God, you thought you'd just slip that in there. That's a cruise level joke.
I would have got away with it
if it weren't for those meddling me's.
Yeah, the Rio del Plata, the River Plate, as they say in the UK for some reason.
Yeah, the River Plate, although Plata means silver in Spanish. Yeah. So why it's not called the River Silver if the Brits are going to change it?
The River Plate sounds dumb.
But this little river is
it's a big river.
This big river,
huge estuary there, right?
It ends up playing this function in both World War I and World War II, or it ends up being a place where German ships find themselves trapped by the British, who are waiting out in the ocean.
This happens at the beginning of World War II as well.
It does.
I've seen a movie.
It does. The Graf Spee
yeah.
Was like the pride of the German Navy, and it just happened to get sort of bottled up in the inlet there, or the mouth of the river at Montevideo. And because of bad intelligence, the captain of the Graf Spee imagined that there was this enormous British fleet waiting to sink him, and so he scuttled his ship.
Wah, wah.
The first naval battle of World War I also happens here.
Really? Of all places?
Of all places.
Off the coast of Uruguay.
War is declared in August of 1914. And at that time, the Trafalgar is down in South America. It's there.
It's loading up or something.
It's right. It's fueling up. It gets out of there, but on the 26th of August, so only just 2 weeks later, the first battle of World War I, first naval battle between the HMS Highflyer and the SS Kaiser Wilhelm de Grosse.
Now, which one was the German ship?
Let's see.
I like Highflyer. That's a pretty cool name for a ship.
Yeah, it's super bad.
It's a British ship of some kind.
It's a.
I guess when I said U.S. cultural hegemony, obviously the U.S. was going to be neutral for years and years of this, right?
Right, and had not achieved cultural hegemony.
Yeah.
Well,
we got the Monroe Doctrine, but it's just on paper. What's it actually doing for us?
Right. Right, and the Monroe Doctrine. I mean, it can only be a doctrine as far as you can enforce it. But the HMS High Flyer sank the Kaiser Wilhelm de Grosse, and that was the beginning of the big
4 years of naval battle. Right?
4 years of naval battle. But it certainly made a strong impression on the Trafalgar, who was sort of.
It was going to go home the same way. I was going to go via Morocco, and now it's.
And so what happened was the Trafalgar was requisitioned. It was turned into a ship of war. And unlike a lot of cruise ships that get turned into troop ships, the Trafalgar was actually turned into a warship.
It's not just transporting stuff. It's got weaponry?
Yeah, her fancy china all went into a cabinet. And the Germans boarded the ship and mounted big cannons on it and said, all right, you're a battle cruiser now.
Did they get to use the pool?
Wow. In all the records that I read, it's not clear what happened to the pool. I bet you they just drained it.
Do you think the lifeguard's still there? No running. Somebody's shooting at them. We got incoming. No running.
There's a very cool little archipelago of islands. And by cool, I mean, it's probably, by cool, I mean uninhabitable.
I guess that's what a lot of people mean by cool.
Called Trindade and Martin Vaz, and these are islands that are out off the coast of Brazil, somewhere between Ascension Island and St. Helena.
So much closer to the South American side and the African side, but still pretty far out there.
Way, way out, and they were discovered by da Gama back in 1502.
The Portuguese again,
completely uninhabited. Claimed by da Gama for Portugal.
A bunch of puffins, probably.
Right. No, in fact, originally they were covered with forest. They were these beautiful forested islands out in the middle of the Atlantic. And then, of course,
Portugal.
The first British guy that arrived set loose a bunch of pigs and rats and cut down all the trees, because that's the first thing you do when you civilize a place.
The trees are the view. Hasn't he seen the Seattle bumper sticker?
And now they're just, they're just windswept rocks. Yeah. But for centuries, they were these little islands that seemed like they had a good purpose, right? It seems like, wow, there's an island here. This is better than just endless sea.
Seems strategic somehow.
Right. And so there was always someone landing on them and trying to claim them, but unable to stay for more than an afternoon before they needed to keep going because there was no food or water there. In fact, in the very late 19th century, the site of Trindade was another example of a guy trying to make a little kingdom for himself. An American by the name of James Hardin Hickey landed on Trindade and declared it a sovereign nation.
Did he give himself? All these Americans give themselves royal powers. Did he give himself a title? Americans crave.
He did.
Crowns and royalty.
He was the Prince of Trinidad. And he said Prince of Trinidad, although this island is called Trindade. And he set up he opened a diplomatic mission in in New York.
It's a clever little branding thing to try to get himself confused with a much bigger, more prosperous
That's
island.
Right. Yeah. That's right.
And with better steel drum music.
But this island was also sort of requisitioned by the Germans as a place for resupply, a place that they would station a couple of ships that had guns and fuel and ammo to make just a little base to resupply their ships in the South Atlantic. And that's where the Trafalgar went to be outfitted as a warship. And she went out and did a cruise, an uneventful cruise where she didn't encounter anybody to fight, which I think happens more often than not. But then on her second trip out, on the 13th of September in 1914, which is my birthday. I was born in 1914 on the 13th of September.
Happy 105th birthday.
Thank you. She was there in the harbor, and she had disguised herself as the RMS Carmania. as a ploy.
She had disguised herself as the British, as another British liner.
Yeah, as a British liner, she was a German liner.
Sorry, as another liner, a British one. And what do you do to disguise yourself? You just paint a new name on it. That's what they do in movies, right?
Yeah, they kind of they raise up the Union Jack, or
Yeah.
I mean, there are certain things you can do. I think that the Trafalgar, when it was originally built, had 3 smokestacks, but one of them was fake.
So they took down the
and
fake
they took down
funnel.
the fake smokestack.
Took down the big water slide.
Yeah, that's right. Emptied the pool. I think the idea being that she would be steaming out and at a distance would look like the Carmania, and other British shipping would sort of either lower their guard or try to have some kind of reunion out in the sea, and then she would suddenly raise up her
German colors,
her skull and crossbones, and go to war. But to her great misfortune, the actual RMS Carmania had also been outfitted with guns and turned into not a troop ship, but a warship, and was plying these same waters looking for enemy shipping.
Well, that's awkward. Because if any boat's not going to fall for that, it would be the actual
Carmania is not going to say, "Is that the Carmania? Wait a minute. No, we're the Carmania."
Is that a mirror? It's like a Marx Brothers routine.
And they also didn't think it was the Caronia who was elsewhere engaged. So the Carmania spots the Trafalgar, and the Trafalgar spots the Carmania, and they decide that they're going to engage in a naval battle.
Now, where is this? Is this near the Martin Vaz and Trindade, or are they just in the middle of the ocean somewhere?
No, the Trafalgar is actually there there's not a port, but it's there in harbor at Trindade, and the Carmonia actually spots its smoke first.
The Carmania.
I'm sorry, the Carmania, not the Carmonia or the Caronia.
Goodbye, Rosie, Queen of Caronia.
But Carmonia is actually another nation state where just a crazy person has decided that somewhere in the middle of the nation of Portugal, there's a town called Carmonia.
There must be a website that just generates these for people.
And his flag has a golden retriever on it.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, he seems like a nice guy, the king of Carmania.
I would go there. It seems friendly. I'm surprised more nations don't have nice, friendly dog breeds on the flag. Like, why do you always have like a eagle or something mean?
Dragon.
Right.
Put a dog on there.
Put a corgi, for crying out loud.
Well, the Carmania sees the smoke of the Trafalgar, and this is the guns that were fitted to the decks were sort of larger, long-range guns. They didn't just sort of put machine guns up there. They put cannons on both of these boats. And so their initial engagement, both captains realized that they needed to have a sea battle. This wasn't just a thing where one of them,
like on a personal level, they needed that.
This is the law of the sea.
That's what
right?
we do.
And so they both steamed out to sea to engage one another in the spirit of gentlemanly combat. And their initial conflict started. I mean, they were a couple of miles apart and started lobbing cannon fire at one another.
I'm guessing the accuracy is not that great.
The accuracy was surprisingly good.
Oh, they're hitting each other from miles out?
They are hitting each other. Ooh. And neither ship is particularly armored.
Well, yeah. When you refit an ocean liner, you can add guns, but you can't armor the whole hull,
maybe they draped some blankets over the side. But they're both taking fire. And as they, I think the Trafalgar's guns maybe were a little bit more accurate. The Carmonia realized that she wanted to fight a little bit closer. They started to edge toward each other, scoring hit after hit on one another.
You sunk my battleship.
And neither one of these ships has none of the retrofitting included any of the other components of a modern warship. There were no elevators to bring the shells up. There was no sort of system. And so it ends up
they're running up a big central staircase.
Yeah, they're
with red satin carpeting.
Like guys running up holding shells and basically like fighting a war like you would if you had cannonballs.
Yeah.
Just like load the gun as fast. There's no auto loading. There's no magazine. It's just these guns are just sort of,
and they are just shooting cannon at each other broadsides, right?
Cannon shot at broadside. That's right. I mean, like,
I wonder if everyone was like, yeah, this is the stuff. It's like getting to drive an antique car.
it feels
or something.
like, in a way, maybe the last battle of this kind. The two ships closed upon one another until they were within 100 or so feet, where the crews on both ships were just standing on deck shooting machine guns at one another and still firing these cannons.
What were the casualties like?
Well, so both ships caught on fire, and the Carmania received the worst damage up front. Her entire bridge was blown off. It seemed like both ships were in danger of burning, just like completely burning up. They'd each managed shots that were below the water line, so both ships were taking on water. I think that
what a metaphor for war, you know?
Oh man,
makes you think, doesn't it?
You just said it. The Carmania was hit 79 times, but a lot of those shells are producing sort of grape shot or shrapnel. The 79 hits produced 304 holes, and holes is a naval term.
Does it mean holes?
It's not just, it does, but it's not just like, I've got a hole in my pocket. It's like it represents like, that last shot produced X number of holes. 304 holes in the Carmonia. The Trafalgar.
I feel like you didn't have to explain that. I understood. I understood what it means if you put 304 holes in a ship. Maybe I'm no sailor, but
the Trafalgar was only hit the kind of embarrassing 73 times.
What are we blaming here? Bad British seamanship?
Well, no, because those 73 shots produced 380 holes. In the Trafalgar. In the course of the battle, it seemed like the Carmonia was the one that was...
the Carmania.
I'm sorry. The Carmonia being a nation in Portugal. The Carmania had received the worst of it and was the one most at risk. But then all of a sudden, in a turnabout, the Trafalgar keels over, as they say, and sinks. And, her crew takes to the seas. There are varying reports of how many casualties, but 280 sailors were saved. The captain went down with the ship.
Were there hundreds of people killed, or was that most of the complement?
50 sailors, maybe.
This didn't have its usual 1,600 people aboard.
There weren't any. No one in a tuxedo ended up in the water. There wasn't a string quartet playing. It had a minimum complement of crew, but 50 men died, and the Trafalgar went to the bottom. The Carmania was also at risk of sinking completely. The bridge was gone. The ship was on fire. It was also listing.
If I'm the captain of the Carmania, you know what I do? I disguise myself as the Trafalgar now. Keep them guessing.
What?
Double switcheroo.
You disguise yourself as the surgeon of the Trafalgar.
That's right. Master Commander, baby.
At that moment, because both ships were sending out distress signals during the battle, so every British and German and every other ship within 100 miles is listening to the battle and steaming toward Trindade, like looking to engage.
Because this is like the first week of the war, and none of these navies have met yet. Right. This could be the biggest naval battle in history.
That's right. And because the battle between the High Flyer and the Kaiser Wilhelm de Grosse produced that result at the mouth of the River Plate, or the Plata, let's call it. There are scores to be settled already. Like all of this is happening. This is very early in the war, and it's all happening off the coast of South America. There was a German warship that arrived on the scene to find the crippled Carmania listing, smoking, and on the verge of sinking. It was the SS Crown Prince Wilhelm, and the captain had it would have been nothing to then sink the Carmania. But he was so freaked out by listening to all the radio traffic and felt like the greater risk was he was going to get boxed in by British...
A newly arriving British fleet?
Yeah, British fleet was just over the horizon. And so looking at the Carmania and determining that it had no chance of surviving, he left it.
Oh man, that's a bummer if you're a German sailor in the water watching your.
So the German sailors were picked up by other, because there were so many ships in the area. The survivors were all picked up. But yeah, right. What a bummer when you're like,
we got reinforcements.
Shoot him! Come on! Aw, man!
He's leaving. He must be a Bavarian.
And the rules of battle would allow you to paint a silhouette of the Carmania on your smokestack if you just delivered the coup de grace.
Wait, is that true?
Sure.
You would paint the boat on your smokestack?
Well, I think.
I don't know. I've seen flying aces do it.
Yeah, well, and I think submarines do it too. Yeah, I think you would be entitled to paint a little silhouette of
painting a cruise ship
every
on
ship
your
you
smokestack.
sink. But the Carmania actually limped away and survived. She ended up meeting up with with part of the British fleet. They towed her to safety. She was repaired in Gibraltar, and continued to act as a patrol ship throughout World War I. She ended up in Gallipoli. She did become a troop ship, and then after the war, returned to passenger liner status.
Really? Did she still have holes in her?
I mean, can you imagine we've already noted 304 separate holes that had to be patched. There must have been...
Maybe some of the cabins have much more light now than they used to.
As you're out playing shuffleboard, there had to have been like a purser that took you around and said, like, here, you can see one of the holes that we
Tourists love to see masonry that still has bullets in it. That's the one thing I know. So it must have been a hit.
It's absolutely true. When we go on the Joko cruise this time, I think we should walk around the Rotterdam and see if we can find any damage from like the poop cruise.
If there isn't any, we're going to put some holes in there. Like I'm going to bring a Black & Decker drill. Cordless drill.
We just use the stickers that those guys with the Camaros put in their trunks.
And that concludes Trafalgar versus Carmania. Entry 1325.IS2314, certificate number 32056, in the omnibus. If we ever said Carmonia at one point instead of Carmania and did not correct ourselves, please send us immediate corrections.
It was very difficult for me not to say Carmonia. I don't know why. I preferred it to Carmania, which is just as inelegant.
We want you to correct us. We want to know all the mistakes we made. You can notify us on social media, where I am at Ken Jennings, John is at John Roderick. The show is jointly at Omnibus Project. Or if you have somehow in your era have access to electronic mail, you can reach us at the omnibusproject@gmail.com. You can send us handwritten nasty corrections to Omnibus Project, P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington, 98155. You were saying, I think in the last entry, John, that you liked when people sent you money.
I do.
This person sent us 2 hundreds and a 50. Unfortunately, they are Dominican Republic pesos.
Oh, wait a minute.
From the Banco Central de la República Dominicana.
Well, let's see. It's so nice to hear you speak Spanish. I feel like I'm in the fish called Wanda.
I will give you the $5 I won in the last entry if you can name the 3 men on the 100 peso bill of the Dominican Republic. You have 3 seconds.
Who, me?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's incorrect. Juan Pablo Duarte, Francisco del Rosario Sanchez, and Matias Ramon Mea. You are on no bills of the Dominican Republic.
Well, the current exchange rate is that 1 Dominican peso equals what? Not 19 cents, but 0.19 cents?
So 5 pesos to the cent. So 250 pesos is 50 cents?
I guess so.
Here you go. Here, keep the change.
Thanks. Yeah, 5,000 pesos is $96.
So that's not going to buy you much in port, because we are going to be in the Dominican Republic in our era shortly.
250 Dominican pesos. It's sort of like it's pocket change.
Is the cost of living low enough there that there's something that costs 50 cents that we can buy with that money?
Well, that'll be interesting to find out. I'm not sure that I have. I've been to the Dominican Republic.
I am sure that I have not.
Oh, wait. No, this is saying 250 Dominican pesos is actually $4.73.
Oh.
So it was 19 cents.
Give me back that money I threw at you then.
You gave it to me.
Yeah, when you gave me bad information about currency trading.
It's almost $5 they sent us.
I trusted you.
Too bad for you, sucker.
Man.
Sucker.
We also got sent... Oh, we should save this for the addenda episode about the Christmas pickle. We got sent, speaking of Spanish, a delightful defecatory Spanish Christmas tradition that I'm sure will be appearing on a future addendum.
Did you say it was defecatory? Did they send you some toilet paper?
They sent us. Well, I don't want to give it away. Yes, it is a poop-themed Christmas decoration.
All right. Well, we'll save
characteristic of the Catalan region.
Subscribers to our Patreon who have generously donated to support the show will get to hear us talk about Ken's Dominican Christmas poop.
It's from Spain, actually. It's not Dominican.
I'm sorry. Spanish Christmas poop.
Yes, and you can if you enjoy the omnibus. And you have currency in your area, if you live in some kind of post-scarcity utopia, and as a result you have disposable income, you can support the program at patreon.com/omnibusproject. You can collaborate with fellow listeners on the Futurelings Facebook page or the Futurelings subreddit. Or is there anything else I usually say that I don't say? I did email. I did mail.
You did mail. You did the subreddit. No, I guess you covered it all, Ken.
I'm going to open one more card because the sticker is sliced bread, the subject of a recent omnibus entry. It's sealed with a sticker of sliced bread, and it's a Happy Thanksgiving card.
Oh, I didn't know that was a thing.
No,
it looks like it's got quite a bit of writing on it.
Have you ever sent someone a Happy Thanksgiving card?
No.
Megan says she wanted to send us something, but she doesn't have anything that sounded good enough. But a Thanksgiving card mailed too late to arrive by Thanksgiving apparently made her threshold of
that sounds good enough.
Mail worthiness. And she wishes us a wonderful holiday and looking forward to all future /past episodes.
There's something written on the back of the card I can see from here.
If you get near Fisherman's Terminal, check out this lovely shop. Oh, it's from a Seattle boutique.
Do we have a thing called Fisherman's Terminal? Oh, she's talking about in Ballard.
Well, no, across the ship canal from Ballard.
Right.
And whatever that is, Interbay turning into Magnolia.
Yeah, I call that Ballard.
Do you ever hang out there with the fishermen?
I do. I've been, there's a couple of good little restaurants there in that part where the fish is real fresh.
The fish from the fish and chips is very fresh there.
Futurelings, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. Ken and I are going on a cruise very shortly, and the cruise ship may be requisitioned into war.
We might get sent to the Straits of Hormuz.
And Ken and I will each get one of those crazy anti-aircraft helmets that you see in old British movies and man a gun together.
We will be next releasing the show from the actual historical Carmania in southern Iran.
Do you think, between the two of us, if one were the gunner and one were the loader, who would be a better gunner? Who would be a better loader?
That's a good question. I mean, the loader probably has to carry heavy stuff, and you look like you have more upper body strength.
This is what I was afraid of, that you, with your good eyesight and your sort of lithe body,
my
relative
clean
to
living,
mine, that you'll end up in the chair aiming the gun, and I'm just going to be schlepping shells.
You don't want to be my R2 unit?
I guess that's what I'll end up doing.
R2, we got a fire back there, and you'll be like, and you'll some hitherto unsuspected part of your body will pop out and take care of the problem. Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate your support.
Well, we hope and pray that this catastrophe we fear does not come. But if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may be or have been our final word. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.